This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Good evening et bonsoir à toutes et à tous. C'est pour moi un honneur de souhaiter la bienvenue à Monsieur le Docteur Pascal Boniface ici à Dublin et à IIEA. Nous vous remercions d'avoir pris le temps de venir partager votre expertise avec nous. Je vous souhaite un excellent séjour à Dublin et en Irlande. Alors, la plus proche au sein de l'Union européenne, France, our closest EU neighbour and fellow republic. France plays a role in today's shifting geopolitical order. So our discussion today will focus on just that, France's place in a changing geopolitical order, with our speaker Pascal Boniface. And in his address, Dr. Boniface will reflect on how France is positioning itself within this shifting global landscape. The presentation will explore France's strategic posture in relation to the evolving transatlantic relationship, its engagement in the Middle East, and its response to the war in Ukraine, among much else. And we'll assess how France is navigating complex security challenges and global realignments in its bid to remain a prominent European and international actor. So it's just for me briefly to introduce our speaker, go through a few T's and C's, and then we can kick off. So Dr. Pascal Boniface, who is a stranger to a very few of you, I think, is the founding director of IIEA, the French Institute for International and Strategic Affairs. He is Editor-in-Chief of La Revue internationale stratégique and l'année stratégique, and the author of more than 80 books on international relations, global power dynamics, French foreign policy, and sports geopolitics. It's a remarkable output. A regular contributor to international media, he also teaches at Sciences Po Paris and Université Paris 8, and is one of the most followed geopolitical experts on social media. Pascal hosts the weekly podcast Comprendre le Monde and produces explainer videos on international affairs by his YouTube channel, both of which I can convey to the room is a great way to spend your time. Dr. Boniface has advised the French Ministries of Defense and Foreign and received numerous honours, including the National Order of Merit and the Légion d'honneur. So, as ever, who are events and meetings, this discussion is on the record. We're meeting in a slightly experimental format, which I'm delighted about, in that we have a crowd joining us online and in person. But when it gets to the questions and answers, those of you who are on the chance to ask a question, you'll be invited to do so in person by unmuting and speaking to us rather than being moderated by a moderator. I'd just like to acknowledge all of you who've taken the time to join us, but specifically colleagues from the Norwegian Embassy, the British Embassy, and indeed the French Embassy, and all of you who've taken the time to be here today. Pascal, again, a sincere welcome. We have up to 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you for your invitation. Very glad to be there. On strategic issue, we have three main lines of division. We had, in fact, because we are down to a strategic evolution. So three lines were a division between Russia and Western world, a division between global South and the Western world, and the division between China and USA. But I feel that I'm not agree with commentators who say that every year you have a strategic evolution, but I think that really we are down to a strategic evolution. On the same level than when Gorbachev came to power, he has changed the world in 6 years, and on the same level when Deng Xiaoping took the reins in China, because in 20 years they have changed China, and therefore they have changed the world. And usually the US president, when they came to power, think about how to manage the international system. Trump wants to destroy it. So there is no longer unity between USA and Europe. And he wants to make an agreement with Russia, passing through over Europe and over Ukraine. And so the division between the Russia and the Western world since 2014, 2022, it's no longer in effect because Trump has decided to make an alliance with Putin and to cancel the strong relationship with European allies. And so he didn't believe in international law. He is not interested in international institutions. He is not interested in United Nations, not even with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and any international agreement. And he's not interested in alliance. And so I think that the Article 5 of NATO alliance, which is a core of NATO, is no longer living. Because for Trump, alliance are a burden. He doesn't want to take into account no more, and he wants Europeans are going to alone. In fact, I think that for NATO, Ukrainian war was both the acme and the end of NATO. And in the first time, remember in 2019, Macron declared that NATO is well dead. He has made this declaration regarding the Turkey behavior, but mostly Trump behavior. And at the end of first Trump mandate, even Angela Merkel has a second thought about NATO, about the links with USA, which is quite rare for Christian Democrat. And but immediately after, Biden was elected, and many people think that we are going back to normal. But it was not totally true. For French with Hocus Picroyal, but at least Biden want to make a new link and want to create a link between the so-called coalition of democracies against the axis of authoritarian rules, which is made with Moscow, Beijing, could add Tehran, North Korea, and so on. Even before the declaration of war against Ukraine, Biden was pleading for an alliance of the Western, not only Western, or other democracy, including some countries which are not really democracies, but the ally of US against the Moscow-Beijing axis. When the war happened between Russia and Ukraine, where every European countries begged to have a stronger US protection, because USA appeared to be the only one to be able to protect European allies against Moscow. And we had even two neutral countries, Finland and Sweden, who thought that it was not necessary to join NATO when Stalin was in power, and who thought that it's an urgency to join NATO regarding Putin behavior and ending the war. And many people think that Putin could not be stopped in Ukraine and could continue his war against European countries. So everybody want to a strong NATO and strong US presence in Europe. And it was functioning in the beginning, but no, there is no more NATO. NATO is still existing as an institution, still existing as an alliance, but in fact, if you are no longer US protection against Russia, the core of NATO is no longer existing. And I think that it's not a short period of time. First, Trump is elected for 4 years, and I think it's a long tendency in US, and it's not your theory according to Trump is trapped by Russian blackmail, but Jill Vance all the same, and there is no rumors about compromise of Jill Vance. So it's really the US leadership is no longer interested in European affairs, and I think that also you have personal detestation of Zelensky by Trump since the electoral campaign in 2020, because he has reproached to Zelensky not to help him against Biden during the campaign. But he has a strategic plan to give up to Europe and to regard the situation with China and to make, I think, to make a Kissinger reverse. So to try to make Russia far away from China and to make a new link between USA and Russia. In the 70s, Nixon and Kissinger have succeeded to take China in their arms to oppose the main threat, which was Russia at this time. For the US, no, the main threat is China. And they want to make a division, to make a separation between Russia and China, because many people in US, and not only Trumpists, people like Nashmeyer, Waltz, and so on, think that the most important mistakes of US policy for the last 10 years is to push Russia into Chinese house. But I think it's just impossible to make a division between China and Russia, because you have strong personal links between Putin and Xi. They know each other since 2003, long before Xi came to power. And 40% of Russia trade is made with China. And I think that Putin is not fool enough to trust a US president and to make such important shift of policy without any credibility of Trump behavior, because he will change his mind soon. And I think that for Trump, he has plus the tariff. So I think Trump made two mistakes. The first is to only rely on hard power and forget soft power. The US is a soft power country. They have developed, invented soft power. They have a lot of assets in soft power, and Trump relied only in hard power. I don't think he's a warrior. Of course, it was a Peace Nobel Prize, but he wants to make peace. He don't want to make new war. He knows that US public is tired with its external interventions, but he wants to make economic pressure, sanction, so it's hard power. And the second mistake, its motto is make America great again. So it's internal admission that US are not so powerful than before. But he acts as we are living in a unipolar world, which is not the case. And of course, he will fail because he creates enemies. Look at the situation in Canada. I think that the Trump factor will be probably decisive to allow to the liberals to have a fourth mandate, which is not so frequent. And in many countries, 25, you have a diminution of people want to go to visit America by 25% in every country. I think that the US university will be very less attractive for many students next year, and so on. And instead of trying to make an alliance with European countries in front of China, he insults you, which is has been created to entube the USA, and he has stated, even in the source knowledge, that EU is an enemy of USA. So it's not a good way to make a coalition. And in fact, Biden was more clever. Sleepy Joe was more clever because, in fact, Biden was playing Go, and he has organized a containment of China with the Quad, with Australia, Japan, India, and now you have new direct flight from between India and China, because the Indians are very frightened by tariffs, by US tariffs, and so they have close links, of more important links between China and India. Biden has succeeded to make a new alliance between South Korea and Japan, which was very difficult because these countries are very bad relations due to history. And all these things are destroyed by Trump. So he's alone regarding confronted China, and I think that China, it's been just impossible for China to give up in front of Trump. First, for public opinion, because even if China is not a democracy, you have a public opinion in China, above all on national issue, on patriotism, on nationalism. The Chinese population is not has not the right to express on political internal affairs. But if nationalists are at stake, they have free hands to express themselves, and in front of the rest of the world, China will not afford to obey to US. So regarding Ukrainian war, I think there is two different things. So it's my personal view, it's not the official French policy. I think that when we confront the situation, the Zelensky goals are just illusion, are just unrealistic. Because when you are a country of 30 million of inhabitants, confronted to a country of 145 million of inhabitants, it's just impossible to reconquer Crimea and Donbass. So the request of Zelensky to stop the war once Ukraine has taken back Crimea and Donbass, if they could continue the war for 10 years, it will never happen. So I feel that to stop the war, and it's even better for Ukraine because they just send more people to be killed and more people to be injured and more destruction in the country. So I think that Trump is realistic, wanting to make a peace deal regarding the front line. Because military speaking, in fact, the US Chief of Staff has said that in October 22. The Ukrainian Chief of Staff has declared that in October 23, and he has been sacked just after, that it's impossible for Ukrainian to reconquer the lost territories. And as Russia has a nuclear weapon, it's impossible for European or for Western countries to send troops to fight. Had Yugoslavia nuclear weapons in 1999, there is no Kosovo war, and so there is an aggressive sanctuarization by Russia due to its nuclear status. So I think that when we regard the situation, it's just impossible for Ukraine to fulfill its official goal war, but it's not a sufficient reason to recognize juridically the situation as Trump wants to do and to lift the sanction immediately. So something is realistic, so it's better to stop the war. And in fact, Zelensky wants to do it in March 22 at the beginning. And Boris Johnson has convinced him to continue the war. And I think that Ukraine would have been in a better situation if the war stopped in March 22. But nevertheless, we have decided, so we have to continue to help Ukraine. But the main Trump mistake is to give all the cards to Putin and to put no condition on the war. So I think it's realistic to stop to dream of Ukrainian flag on Donbass and on Crimea, but it's a mistake to say to Putin, whatever you want, it's okay. And we will officially recognize it's the end of international law because we could have a situation de facto, but not de jure. It's totally different. And of course, it's also difficult to stop immediately the sanctions. And I think that we will have a huge split between European countries and US. I think it would be very difficult or even impossible for European countries to resume economic ties with Russia. We don't buy tomorrow Russian gas. We have given to many assets in Russia. France has given up to 20 billions of euros in Russia, and Germany has suffered very importantly, and France as well, due to the change of economic situation. When you stop to buy cheap gas from Russia and you are buying expensive gas to USA. But there is a distrust on multilateralism, distrust on United Nations, distrust of international law, and distrust of alliance. So the world we are living since 1845 is no longer the same. And Fabienne is used to live in China. In China, the crisis is both a risk and opportunity. And I think that this prison crisis is both a risk and opportunity. And maybe we become to adults, we were perhaps in some of strategic somnambulism, and taking into account US umbrella, and we have given the keys of our security to US. It was no more than the end of the World War II, because nobody has the power to be protected against Russia. It was even perhaps less normal in the 80s after the implosion of the Soviet Union, but it was normal after the Russian aggression of Ukraine. But this aggression has in the first times developed NATO, and just after, 3 years after, killed NATO. The NATO we believe in, the NATO we are used to live with. And of course, I know that for many people in Europe, France is supposed to be anti-American, and that every morning the French workers say, oh, to make to noise, the USA. No, I said, we have a plan of strategic autonomy since De Gaulle, in fact. Maybe it was a little unrealistic when De Gaulle was in power, but of course, due to the fact that it was nuclear weapons, it's easier for us to speak to an equal footing with Russia and to be independent from USA. There is no longer who will trust USA as a protector now. Nobody in Europe. And I think, look at Taiwan, look at Japan, look at Saudi Arabia. Nobody could trust USA for the next 4 years. And even after, because if G. Vance follow Trump, and in any case, we could not afford to be dependent of the vote of 300,000 of voters in 3 states in USA. So I think it's a risk and opportunity, and the strategic autonomy is not opposed to alliance. It's opposed to dependency. And I think that we have taken some strong decisions. First, after the COVID crisis, which has reinforced Europe with the plan. And fortunately, we had Brexit in this time, because I think if UK was still in EU, it would have been very difficult to have the plan of 2021 to launch again economic situation in Europe. And now we have a plan. It could be done with UK, because UK is very important military player. But we have a plan, autonomy in Europe, and to be able to be protected. It's possible, because when you look at Russian GDP, when you look at European GDP, when you look at the economic situation, of course, the most important difficulty is not to increase military expenditure to buy American weapons, because it will be to reward the traitor. And for the last 2 years, 63% of military acquisition of European countries were done outside their own countries, are done in USA. And 78 abroad, with you could add South Korea and Israel. So we must develop an industrial and technological basis for military development. And we have some years to do it. I don't think Russia will be in a position to launch a new war in the next 4-5 years, because they are exhausted. They are not totally destroyed, but they are exhausted. So we have 2, 3, 4 years to build some things, but of course we have to take the decision now, immediately, because the time is running short, and we must advance very quickly toward this autonomy to be able to be protected. And I think it will be easier for us than for Japan, than for Taiwan. So at least we are 27 plus UK plus other countries who could be in the party, like Turkey or other country. And so we have to take a decision. And when I heard the next German chancellor saying that Germany must be independent from USA, it's a strategic revolution. So the things will be never again the same. I think it's just useless to dream of the old gold days coming back soon. They won't coming back, and we have to be adult. We were, like that's a French joke, we have a movie, a very famous movie in France, whose name is Tanguy. Tanguy is a man about 30 years. We're still living at his parents' home because he don't want to be autonomous. So we were strategic Tanguy. We must become independent and autonomous.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.